And then next section, we're going to look at some real companies of the scale that you could potentially invest in, or the kind of companies that you might in the future invest in. I'm going to do that with some real companies that I invested in and Shala invested in through Fledge. These are the real fledglings. And we're going to do it session by session, not for all 17 sessions, because I don't want you to be here until 11 o'clock at night. And we haven't had that many failures in recent times to talk through. We're going to mostly talk about failures. All right, so Fledge 1, the first session of Fledge, it was in July of 2012, which to me doesn't seem very long ago, but it is quite a long time ago. We only had 45 applicants. They were pretty much all from this part of the country, few from Canada. We picked 7. They were all literally here. This one, Burn, is listed as Kenya because that was where they wanted to go do business. Here's listed as New York, but I found the entrepreneur here in Seattle. Everybody else based in Seattle. One of them that failed was called Trash Backwards. Charlie, remember Trash Backwards? Yeah, I got a nod. So the idea was you have stuff in your house. You probably have stuff in your house. It's not really trash, but you don't really need it. So like if you drink wine, you're going to have wine bottles. And yes, you could try and recycle them. They don't actually get recycled, but you could try and recycle them. Or if you had, hoses, rope, sheets, something that a craftsperson could use, you could list it on Trash Backwards, and then they could pull it off there and they'd pay the shipping and they'd take it off your hands, and then they could make something out of it. And so here was examples of things people did with glass bottles. So why did we think they were going to succeed? Okay, we didn't have Bill Gross's framework back then, but we'll use his framework now. So in terms of timing, it seemed perfect. Etsy was growing. Etsy, I think, was about to be public or just gone public. Etsy is a place where craftspeople can sell their goods. So it looked like it was a good time for this kind of stuff, just based on the Etsy users. That's all we needed was Etsy. In terms of team, I was teaching at BGI at the time, and I had a lot of applicants who were students. But in this case, there was a 4-person team, and 2 of them were faculty members. So you want to talk about getting a high-powered team. This is like, I got an ex-Microsoft person there. I got a CFO who does that for a living for other people, 2 other people on the team. Look like a killer team. In terms of ideas, the idea of sustainability and circular economy was starting to show up in the news. It just seemed like perfect. It seemed like just the right company at just the right time, but it didn't work. And so it didn't work for a few reasons. First and foremost, we said you got to bring a product to market that people want. It wasn't the right product. There just were, it didn't get that network effect. It didn't get enough traction. It didn't have the money to spend on attracting attention. And the product really just wasn't that good. Like even if you really wanted to use it, it was just clunky. And we'll talk about Buy Nothing in a second, because most of you might have heard of that. It turned out it was not the right team. It turned out that these were 4 really good people, but not together. They just could not work together. The CEO finally gave up on the rest of the people. And then basically the other 2 that weren't faculty, he stepped out. The CFO stepped out. The other 2 were remaining, and they just didn't really, this was not the product that they really wanted to do. What they wanted to do was Buy Nothing. The other 2 people are the creators of Buy Nothing. If you've ever seen that, it's on Facebook. There's probably 100 million people in the world who now use Buy Nothing. And I went and I remember sitting in the living room of one of these people saying, great, awesome, this is a success. Back when it was like 100,000 people. I said, let's make it a business. Let's make it a nonprofit. If you don't want to be a for-profit, let's just make it something. And they're like, no, we're happy with it on Facebook. So it's a success. This set led to Buy Nothing, but as an investment, this was not a good investment because ultimately it ran out of cash. Right? When you have a team blowing up, you really just can't have any investors come in. When you lose your CEO, you're probably going to lose all your investors. Next company in the cohort to talk about is Personify. You have any? Sorry, Charlie, you have anything to add to that?
I'm a huge Buy Nothing user, and I had a sense it was from Bainbridge. I didn't realize it was 2 people from Trash Backwards.
Yeah, the other 2 people, the only other 2 people there were. Personify, I love this one when it was pitched to me. Personify, the pitch is 90% of Americans give to charity, give money to charity. 10% volunteer their time. Big disparity. And why? It's a lot easier to just send over some cash than to give your time. And it's especially different because it's hard to find some place that, that that you feel like you can be useful at the time when you're available, and on and on and on and on. So this guy pitched and he said, we're building an app. It's on the web. This is a mock-up, but it's on the web and it's on a mobile phone. It basically looks like Google Maps, except all the dots are places that are nonprofits that want you to volunteer. You click on one, you click on I'm in, and it'll just tell you when to show up and where to go. And it'll be like a social network. You'll hear that word a lot here because it was a hot thing in the early teens. And it'll tell all your friends that you're going to try and get them to come with you. Great idea, right? So why did we think it was going to work? Well, again, social networking was getting to be really hot in 2012. Facebook wasn't public yet, I don't think. I don't think it even hit 1 billion people yet, or around that time. Smartphones were not as ubiquitous as they are today, but they were getting there. So the idea of Google Maps was pretty new back then as well. It just seemed like a good time for all this stuff to come together. Again, on team, it was 2 guys who used to work in the smartphone division of Nokia, Worker and Boss. Seemed like the right team. They knew how to build these things. And it was a good mashup, right? Apps and maps and social good and all that. So we thought it would work. And it was a really simple problem on why it failed. The main guy just never shipped the product. It was like 3 years later, I finally got an email saying, oh yeah, here it is. And all the features weren't even there 3 years later. Part of that was, I don't want to say they lied about being a team, but they weren't really a team. There was a requirement that there were 2 people on the team in order to apply for the accelerator. So the boss said he's part of the team, but he never did anything for the company. I've seen that subsequently many more times until I caught on to this trick. You got to find a real team, not just people who call themselves a team. And because he didn't ship, there was no money that came in, and so it ran out of cash, right? But that's a byproduct. One more in this group, another app. A lot of failure stories when it comes to tech for good. I love this idea. I still wish this idea were implemented. It still hasn't been done right. I found this entrepreneur. He was doing a different product at Techstars here in Seattle, but he told me that he liked this idea better, which I believe was true. He was from New York. He was a creative. He lived in one of those apartment buildings that was just full of creatives. And what they did was they put posters by the door of their art studio exhibits and their theater and their music and everything. And that's how they communicated, just with posters. And then one day the landlord said, that's ugly. And he took them all down. And he told the steward of the building, take them all down. I don't want them there anymore. And I don't know how, I've lived on Bainbridge for a long time. There's poster boards here and there around the island where this still happens. So the founder of Here said, let's move it online. And so he whipped up a mock-up website. He got it up and running. It worked for his building. And then the big idea was, let's do it for everywhere. So instead of a social network for people like Facebook, or brands like Twitter, or design like Pinterest, or resumes like LinkedIn, let's do a social network for places. Let's subscribe to your block. Let's subscribe to your neighborhood. Let's subscribe to your city, wherever you care about. And let's see what's going on. Anyone who wants can post there, right? And you follow a place instead of a person. So again, social networking was a fundable thing back then. It's kind of past that now. Again, smartphones were the right timing. This is going to be a smartphone app. And one more in here was that this was the beginning when the millennials and the whatever we call the people older than that started moving into the cities. It seemed like the perfect thing at the perfect time for that. Again, the team seemed really good. We needed a co-founder. I found a co-founder. She was an alumnus of BGI at the time. BGI was my place, right, where I was finding all these things. Look, everything looked great, but they didn't ship the product. They didn't ship the product because that turned out there was a 3rd person on the team that they never told me about. And they didn't tell me about it because the original founder said, well, he wasn't really there. He was like in the room, but he wasn't really part of the discussion. But the other person thought he was a co-inventor, and he sued for stealing the idea. And as soon as you get to lawsuits, yeah, that's kind of the end of a startup. So the team blew up, not the 2 people I put together, the other invisible person out there. So, number 2, number 2 on that pretty graph, not the right team. Here it's number 3. Sometimes these things happen. And what could have this been? Like, where could this have gone? Yeah, there's a company out there. It's called Nextdoor. Maybe you've used it. It's a social network of places. Right? It's older. It got started before this, but it really wasn't anywhere on the radar. But in 2012, they raised, just to be clear, this is Crunchbase that talks about startup funding. They've raised $455 million. They're in Series F. So that's six rounds of funding from venture capitalists. They got some big name venture capitalists in here. So if we had gotten here up to a stage where it was big enough, it might not have been Nextdoor, but it probably would have been acquired by Nextdoor. So we would have had one of those two opportunities if we had gotten it to a success state. But no, instead we blew up. You remember that one, Shaw?
Isn't it still around?
Nextdoor's still around, but
Oh yeah. No, I didn't really know here.
Yeah, I'll take in the chat window if anybody's actually gone on Nextdoor. Do you have an account and are you active? This is one where I don't think they did it quite right. I think they were missing just this aspect of that creative thing of what's going on in the neighborhood. Just making it that simple. Sometimes it's simplicity that wins. We've learned that from Apple. And so the simplicity of here's just what's happening in this block or in this neighborhood or in this city, and having that in visual form. I think that's what Nextdoor missed.